I never imagined betrayal would hit me from both sides, like a car wreck you didn't even see coming until the metal twisted around your ribs. My name is Jacob Hartley. I'm 41 years old, and until about a year ago, I thought I had a quiet, fulfilling life in a leafy part of upstate New York. I ran a modest but successful woodworking business, custom cabinetry, furniture, reclaimed wood designs, the kind of thing that keeps your hands rough but your heart proud. My wife, Celeste, was a real estate agent, charming, driven, always immaculately put together, the kind of woman who could walk into a listing and close it before the smell of fresh paint even dried. We'd been married for 10 years. I met her through her younger sister, Mallory, back when they were both waitressing part-time to get through school. Celeste was the ambitious one. Mallory was the wild one, bouncing between boyfriends and bartending gigs, never quite settling but always lighting up a room. And while I always considered Mallory a bit much, she was still family. Or so I thought. My best friend Devin, who's been my rock since the 4th grade, always joked that I had stepped into a rom-com setup. But to me, it felt like love the way I needed it. Firm, organized, goal-oriented. We bought a modest ranch-style home together and planned for kids, though they never came, partly due to complications and partly due to Celeste's ever-expanding career goals. I poured my energy into building a life of comfort and routine. And for a long time, I thought we were happy, or at least compatible enough to count. That all shattered on a Tuesday in late autumn, when the leaves were turning copper and the air smelled like chimney smoke. Celeste was supposedly on a business trip to Ithaca, and I'd driven to my buddy Leon's place to help him install some new kitchen shelving. When I returned home a day earlier than planned, thanks to a canceled client meeting, I walked into the sound of laughter, hers and someone else's. It wasn't just any laughter, it was Mallory's giggle, the one I hadn't heard since Christmas, the one that sounded like mischief wrapped in honey. My boots were still wet with mud when I found them on the living room couch, clothes disheveled, legs tangled like teenagers, a half-finished bottle of wine between them, and my throw blanket twisted like a secret they forgot to bury. They didn't see me at first. I just stood there, frozen in a knot of nausea and disbelief. When Celeste finally looked up, the color drained from her face like someone pulled the batteries out. Mallory's only reaction was a lazy smirk and a shrug like she'd just spilled coffee on my rug. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just walked out, drove aimlessly for an hour, ended up at Devin's, and crumpled in the driver's seat until he found me and hauled me inside like I'd been shot. He listened without saying much, handed me a beer, and said, "Well, we're gonna fix this. Just not today." And that's when it all began, not the pain, because that had arrived the second I saw their skin tangled like roots, but the revenge. Not rage. Not violence. Just cold, clean strategy. Because while Celeste thought she was leveling up her life and Mallory thought she was proving some twisted point, neither of them remembered one key fact. The house was in my name, the land was bought with my inheritance, and their fresh start came with a mortgage I controlled. I spent the next 2 months living like a ghost in my own life, watching Celeste try to spin the narrative to our mutual friends, watching Mallory post Instagram stories from my guest bathroom, watching my entire 10-year foundation reduced to some Pinterest version of betrayal. But while they were sipping wine and playing house, I was working with a lawyer, gathering paperwork, getting the house appraised, calculating taxes, and finding every legal foothold I needed to take back what was mine. And that was just the start. Because this wasn't just about a house. This was about showing them that betraying someone who builds things with his hands means eventually, those hands build a trap you never saw coming. The hardest part wasn't watching them play house in the home I built. It was pretending I didn't care. For 2 months after I caught Celeste and Mallory tangled on my couch like snakes sunbathing in the open, I disappeared from my own life. I moved in with Devin temporarily, told everyone I was on a retreat for work, and let them make their assumptions while I met with a lawyer named Kendra Moreno, a no-nonsense bulldog with a specialty in property and asset disputes. She was recommended by Leon's cousin, who had gone through a nasty divorce and swore she was the kind of woman who files motions before you finish your sentence. Kendra was impressed I hadn't stormed the house or gone scorched earth. She said, "Men who wait and plan, they win. The motion is how they win, but planning is how you do." First, we verified what I already knew. Celeste's name was not on the deed. I bought the house before we got married, inherited the land from my late uncle, and had only ever added her as a co-signer to the utilities, not the title. That was critical. The house was mine, and legally, she was just a long-term guest, no tenant rights if I played my cards right. Meanwhile, I kept paying the mortgage and taxes, because I wasn't going to give them anything to use against me in court. I even Venmo'd her half of the cable bill just to keep everything on the up and up. While she thought she was winning, I was slowly removing every legal excuse she could throw at me. But here's the part that made this revenge more than just paperwork. I knew Celeste had always wanted to flip houses. She'd talk about it constantly at dinner parties, fantasize about remodeling, paint swatches, even pitch the idea of starting a YouTube channel. Our home, the one she and Mallory had now made their little love nest, was her starter dream project. I also knew, through some light social media stalking and a fake buyer inquiry sent through a friend's dummy account, that she was planning to list it for sale within 6 months under the table, using her connections to quietly find a cash buyer so she could skirt my involvement. She was going to use the proceeds to fund a new real estate venture with Mallory. I guess they figured I'd just walk away from the house like it was a burnt cake. But I didn't just own the house. I owned the land, the permits, and, thanks to some clever maneuvering through Kendra, I was about to own the narrative. I returned home one afternoon while they were out, changed the locks legally, and left a signed letter taped to the front door stating that I was reoccupying the property effective immediately. Since they had no legal claim to the home and no signed lease, it was within my right to reclaim it. Kendra ensured everything was airtight, even had a process server deliver copies to both of them the same day. When they came home and found themselves locked out, it was like watching children realize the tooth fairy was fake. Celeste tried to scream at me through the Ring doorbell. Mallory just stood in the driveway in her leopard print leggings, jaw clenched like she'd bitten tinfoil. I didn't respond. I simply opened a window and said, "You have 24 hours to retrieve your things. Anything left will be donated or burned. Your call." Then I closed the window and turned the music back up. For the next few days, it was chaos. Celeste tried every angle, emotional, legal, manipulative. She sent emails with phrases like marital equity and emotional rights to residents. But none of it held weight. Kendra anticipated all of it, and the courts agreed. Without a claim to the deed or tenancy protections, she was out. And Mallory? She tried to play the victim. Claimed I was endangering her safety by kicking them out with no warning. Which was rich, considering she'd been sneaking around in my bed for God knows how long. Once they were gone, I went to work. I didn't want to keep the house. I wanted to repurpose it. I didn't want to live inside the ghosts of that betrayal. So I renovated it. Not to flip it, but to rent it out. Not to just anyone, though. No. I found a young couple, Deshawn and Kira, recently married, both public school teachers, both trying to have their first child. I gave them a below-market rate in exchange for upkeep help, and they were thrilled. I kept the house in my name, and even paid for their first 2 months' utilities. Why? Because seeing them build a future where mine had been ripped apart was my way of reclaiming peace. And here's where the true revenge came in. Celeste and Mallory tried to rebound by starting their own real estate project. A fixer-upper they bought with a high-interest loan using Mallory's bar savings and a predatory lender who didn't care that they had no business plan. But what Celeste didn't know was that Leon's girlfriend, Patrice, worked at the city permit office. When I casually mentioned the property address, she flagged the file. Turns out, the zoning laws had just changed on that street, and renovations above a certain value now required a neighborhood board appeal, something Celeste, in her arrogance, hadn't bothered to research. When their first loan draw got frozen pending a permit violation, they were stuck with a half-gutted house and a lien they couldn't clear without another $20,000. And I anonymously sent them a gift basket with a tiny wooden sign I'd carved myself. It read, "Measure twice, cut once." They knew it was for me. I didn't need to sign it. I never heard them say thank you, but silence was sweeter. I didn't think watching someone drown slowly in their own ambition could ever feel satisfying. But it did. Not in a cruel, sadistic way. More like the cold, still satisfaction of justice catching up to people who thought they were untouchable. Celeste and Mallory had spent years treating life like a series of conquests, where charm outweighed integrity and shortcuts were more glamorous than steady ground. Now, they were buried under a mountain of renovation debt, permit violations, and strained credibility. The icing on the cake? The house they tried to flip sat half-finished through the winter, a monument to their hubris, shattered drywall, exposed studs, and one very irate contractor who stopped mid-kitchen because the payment bounced. I didn't sabotage anything beyond what I'd already done. I didn't need to. They were their own worst enemy. I watched from a distance as Mallory tried to rally GoFundMe donations with some teary, vaguely manipulative story about two women trying to build a business in a male-dominated world. It got a few shares, mostly from her yoga class and a couple of friends who didn't know the full story, but it fizzled fast once someone, not me, but probably Devin, posted screenshots of her timeline showing her bragging about taking what I deserve. From a man who didn't appreciate us. Us. Like Betrayal was some girl power team sport. Meanwhile, Celeste was spiraling behind the scenes. A mutual friend, Nikki, who always kept one foot in both social circles like a spy in heels, told me that Celeste had tried returning to her agency for full-time listings again but hit a wall. Her boss, Tony, wasn't thrilled to hear she tried to offload a home without the owner's consent and in violation of license ethics. Turns out, word gets around in a town like ours, especially when the local permit office flags a house and someone in real estate tries to explain it away. She wasn't fired, but she wasn't getting premium listings anymore. She'd gone from showing lakeside condos to weekend open houses in neighborhoods with potholes and questionable school districts. I never gloated publicly. I never badmouthed them. I didn't need to, because the truth had already done all the heavy lifting. The people who mattered, my friends, my clients, my neighbors, stuck by me. Even Leon, who initially joked that I should have burned the house down for insurance, admitted that seeing me take the high road while orchestrating something so sharp was like watching chess in real life. But revenge, as deeply satisfying as it was, didn't fix the hole in me. Not right away. I still had nights when I'd wake up thinking I heard Celeste's footsteps on the stairs. I still kept one drawer in the guest room full of pictures I couldn't throw away but couldn't look at, either. That's when Kira, the young woman renting the house with her husband, invited me to their baby shower. "You built this place," she said, holding her belly and beaming. "You should see what's growing in it now." And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about winning. It was about reclaiming meaning. I went, brought a hand-carved mobile for the nursery, and when I walked into what had once been my house, where I'd eaten dinner with a woman who now spat my name like a curse, I didn't feel rage. I felt release. The walls were repainted. The furniture was theirs. The energy had shifted. It was no longer haunted by lies and perfume and stolen whispers. It was reborn. That night, I drove back to my new place, a fixer-upper I bought with Devin's help, just a few miles down the road. We were turning it into something big. The dual-use space with a showroom for my woodworking business on the ground floor and my private residence upstairs. I'd found purpose again, not just in revenge, but in rebuilding. A few weeks later, I got a call from Nikki. She couldn't resist spilling the latest. Celeste and Mallory had finally sold the shell of their doomed project at a loss. Nearly $60,000 underwater after late fees, repairs, and loan interest. The buyer? A corporate investor who planned to turn it into a short-term rental for traveling nurses. Celeste was apparently back living with her parents, licking her wounds and applying for out-of-state licenses. Mallory had moved in with some tattoo artist she'd met at a music festival, already posting cryptic quotes about growth and letting go of betrayal. I just laughed, not out of cruelty, but clarity. Some people never learn. They don't want to. They mistake manipulation for strategy and consequences for victimhood. And me? I'm not better. I'm better. Because when someone cheats on you with your own blood and tries to steal your foundation, the best revenge isn't just reclaiming what's yours, it's rebuilding something they can't touch. I don't need Celeste to see what she lost. I don't need Mallory to apologize. I have my name on the deed, my tools in the shed, and peace in my bones. And that's more permanent than any ring or promise ever could have been.